Imagine a quiet morning, perhaps in Kanazawa, the old samurai city where a young philosopher named Kitaro Nishida taught at the Fourth Higher School. He was a man deeply immersed in both the ancient wisdom of Zen Buddhism and the burgeoning currents of Western thought, particularly the new psychology of figures like William James. It was in this intellectual crucible, often battling illness and personal sorrow, that Nishida embarked on a profound journey seeking to understand the very foundations of our knowing and being. His great work, An Inquiry into the Good, begins with a concept he called pure experience. So, what exactly did Nishida mean by this phrase, pure experience? He tells us it means knowing things just as they are. It's about completely letting go of our own intellectual contrivances, our clever mental tricks, and simply following the facts. The word pure here is crucial, because, as Nishida observed, what we commonly call experience is almost always already mixed with some kind of thought, some kind of interpretation. True pure experience, then, is a state where we add absolutely no reflection or discrimination. It is, in essence, the very moment of experience itself, unadulterated. Think of it this way. Imagine seeing a vibrant color, or hearing a distinct sound. In that fleeting instant, before you even have the thought, this is caused by something external, or I am the one feeling this, or even what color is this? That is pure experience. It's the immediate, direct encounter. At this most fundamental level of consciousness, there is no separate subject, no I who is experiencing, and no separate object, no thing being experienced. Knowledge and its object are completely unified, fused into one seamless reality. This, Nishida asserts, is experience in its purest form. It's a concept that might seem counterintuitive at first, because our minds are so accustomed to categorizing, judging, and relating everything we encounter. But Nishida, deeply influenced by his Zen training, was pointing to a pre-reflective, non-dual state of awareness. He was wrestling with ideas from Western psychologists like Wilhelm Wundt, who tried to break down consciousness into its smallest elements, and William James, who emphasized the stream of consciousness. Nishida was trying to find a philosophical ground that could encompass both the immediacy of Zen insight and the rigor of modern psychology. Now, you might wonder, does pure experience only apply to simple sensations like seeing or hearing? Nishida believed it extends much further. He argued that all mental phenomena arise in this form. Even when we recall a memory, it's not the past consciousness directly re-emerging. Rather, the feeling of the past is a present emotion. Abstract concepts, far from being some kind of super-empirical entity, are also a type of present consciousness. He drew on James's idea that even a complex thought, like the concept of all triangles when a geometer imagines a single one, is fundamentally a kind of feeling in the present moment. The hollow of meaning around our direct experiences, the awareness of various relationships between facts, all of this, Nishida says, falls within pure experience. Even our will, though its goal might lie in the future, is always felt by us as a present desire. So, if pure experience is so direct and underlies all mental phenomena, what are its qualities? Is it simple or complex? Nishida acknowledges that from one perspective, a pure experience might seem complex. It could be seen as constituted by past experiences or later analyzed into simpler elements. Yet he insists, no matter how intricate it might be, in the moment of its occurrence, pure experience is always a single, unified fact. Even if it's the re-emergence of a past consciousness, once it's integrated into the present consciousness, unified as a single element, and given new meaning, it's no longer identical to that past consciousness. Similarly, when we analyze a present state of consciousness, the analyzed parts are no longer the same as the original, unified whole. From the standpoint of pure experience, everything is specific, unique, and original in its particular instance. How far does this synthesis of pure experience extend? Nishida clarified that the present in pure experience isn't the abstract conceptual now that ceases to be present the moment we think about it. Rather, the present, as a factual state of consciousness, must possess some temporal duration. It corresponds to what James called the focus of consciousness. So, the scope of pure experience naturally aligns with the scope of our attention. However, Nishida went further, suggesting this scope isn't necessarily limited to a single focus of attention. We can, he argues, shift our attention while remaining in a state where subject and object are undivided without mixing in any thought. Imagine a climber, intensely focused on scaling a sheer cliff face, or a skilled musician effortlessly playing a complex piece. In such moments, there's a continuous flow of perception, a perceptual train, as some psychologists might call it. Nishida believed that even animals' instinctive actions are likely accompanied by such mental states. In these phenomena, perceptions maintain a strict unity and connection. As consciousness shifts from one point to another, attention remains fixed on the object. One action naturally leads to the next, leaving no gap for deliberate thought to intervene. Compared to instantaneous perception, the duration and shifts of attention may differ, but the directness and the unity of subject and object remain the same. Indeed, Nishida suggests even what we call instantaneous perception is actually a complex combined construction of experiences. The difference between these states, then, is not one of kind, but merely of degree. Pure experience is not necessarily a single, isolated sensation. What psychologists might call a simple sensation is often an academic construct, an analytic result, rather than a direct, concrete fact of experience. The directness and purity of pure experience, then, don't come from being simple, unanalyzable, or momentary. Rather, they stem from the strict unity of concrete consciousness. Consciousness, for Nishida, is never merely a combination of isolated mental elements, as some psychologists proposed. It is inherently a unified system. Think of the consciousness of a newborn baby. It's likely a chaotic unity, where even the distinction between light and dark isn't yet clear. From this fundamental unity, diverse states of consciousness differentiate and develop. Yet no matter how finely differentiated, this fundamental systemic form is never lost. Our direct, concrete consciousness always appears in this unified form. Even what seems like instantaneous perception adheres to this. For example, when we perceive an entire object at a glance, closer examination reveals that our eyes move and our attention shifts, allowing us to grasp the whole. As long as this underlying unity is strict and consciousness develops spontaneously, we remain on the ground of pure experience. This holds true for both perceptual and representational experience. When a system of representations develops spontaneously, the whole is immediately pure experience. Goethe, for instance, is said to have composed poetry intuitively in his dreams, a perfect example of this. You might think that in perceptual experience, where attention is driven by external objects, there isn't truly a unity of consciousness. But Nishida argued that even behind perceptual activity, an unconscious unifying force must be at work, guiding our attention. Conversely, representational experience, no matter how unified, might seem merely subjective and not pure. Yet, if its unity is necessary, and its elements combine spontaneously, as in a dream where no external factor disrupts the unity, then it becomes indistinguishable from perceptual experience, and we must consider it pure. Fundamentally, Nishida believed there is no inherent distinction between internal and external experience. What makes an experience pure is its unity, not its kind. A representation, when strictly unified with sensation, becomes a single experience. It's only when this present unity breaks, and it relates to other consciousnesses, that it ceases to be a present experience and becomes a meaning. Similarly, if it's just a representation, like in a dream, it can be entirely mistaken for perception. We tend to think sensations are always experience because they often become the focus of attention and the center of unity. Let's delve a little deeper into the meaning of conscious unity to clarify the nature of pure experience. The system of consciousness, like any organic entity, involves a unifying principle that differentiates and develops in an orderly fashion, realizing its whole. In consciousness, as one aspect appears, a unifying activity accompanies it as a feeling of tendency. This activity guides our attention. When the unity is strict or unobstructed, this activity remains unconscious. But if it's obstructed, it emerges as a distinct representation, appearing on the conscious surface, and we move away from the state of pure experience. In other words, as long as the unifying activity is at work, the whole is reality and it is pure experience. Nishida goes on to say that all consciousness is impulsive. If, as some philosophers of will suggest, will is the fundamental form of consciousness, then the form of conscious development is, in a broad sense, the form of the will's development, and its unifying tendency is the will's purpose. Pure experience, then, is the state where there is no gap between the will's demand and its realization. It is the most free and active state. Of course, from the perspective of a selective will, being governed by such an impulsive will might seem like a constraint. But Nishida counters that selective will is already a state where the will has lost its freedom. When it is trained, it becomes impulsive again. The essence of will is not in desiring the future, but in present activity in the present moment. Actions accompanying will are not its elements. From a purely psychological view, will is the inner unifying activity of consciousness, and there is no special phenomenon called will apart from this unifying activity. The pinnacle of this unifying activity is will. Thought, like will, is also a kind of unifying activity, but its unity is merely subjective. Will, however, is the unity of subject and object. This is why will is always in the present, as Schopenhauer also observed. It might seem, then, that pure experience is a chaotic, undifferentiated state, without meaning. But Nishida clarifies that various meanings and judgments arise from the differentiations inherent in experience itself. The latter are not imposed by the former. Experience must inherently possess differentiated aspects. For example, if you see a color and judge it to be blue, this doesn't make the original color sensation clearer. It merely relates it to similar past sensations. If you point to a visual experience and call it a desk, then make various judgments about it, you haven't enriched the content of the experience itself. In short, the meaning or judgment of an experience merely indicates its relation to other things. It doesn't add richness to the experience's own content. What appears in meaning or judgment is merely an abstraction, a part of the original experience, and in terms of content, it is actually poorer than the original. Of course, when we recall an original experience, something previously unconscious might become conscious, but this is simply a matter of paying attention to a previously unnoticed part, not adding something new through meaning or judgment. So if pure experience inherently possesses differentiated aspects, what then are the meanings or judgments we add to it, and how do they relate to pure experience? We usually think that meaning arises, and judgment takes form, when pure experience is connected to objective reality. But from Nishida's standpoint of pure experience, we cannot step outside its scope. The generation of meaning and judgment arises from connecting the present consciousness to past consciousness. In other words, it's based on the unifying activity that integrates it into a larger system of consciousness. Meaning and judgment merely indicate the relationship of present consciousness to other things, revealing its position within the system of consciousness. For example, when a sound is judged to be a bell, we have simply located it within our past experience. Therefore, any consciousness, as long as it is in a state of strict unity, is always pure experience. It is simply a fact. Conversely, when this unity is broken, when it enters into relation with other things, meaning and judgment arise. When past consciousness interacts with the pure experience that appears directly to us, partly combining with the present consciousness and partly clashing with it, the state of pure experience is analyzed and, in a sense, broken down. Meaning and judgment are products of this state of disunity. However, Nishida also suggests that this distinction between unity and disunity is ultimately a matter of degree. There is likely no consciousness that is entirely unified, nor one that is entirely disunified. All consciousness is a systematic development. Just as even instantaneous knowledge contains various oppositions and changes, behind the consciousness of relations like meaning and judgment, there must be a unifying consciousness that makes these relations possible. As once suggested, all judgments arise from the analysis of complex representations, and when judgment is gradually trained, and its unity becomes strict, it takes on the form of pure experience again. Think of learning a skill or an art. What was initially a conscious effort becomes entirely unconscious as one masters it. Taking this a step further, Nishida proposes that pure experience and its meaning or judgment are simply two sides of consciousness, two different ways of looking at the same thing. Consciousness on one hand possesses unity, and on the other, it must also have an aspect of differentiation and development. Yet, as William James explained in his Stream of Consciousness, consciousness is not merely where it appears to be, but implicitly relates to other things. The present can always be seen as part of a larger system. What we call differentiation and development is, in fact, the activity of an even greater unity. If meaning, then, is also an activity of greater unity, does pure experience transcend its own scope in such cases? For instance, when it relates to the past in memory or to the future in will, can pure experience be considered to transcend the present? Psychologists might say that consciousness is an event, not a thing, and thus is new every moment. The same consciousness never recurs. But Nishida suspected this view wasn't from the standpoint of pure experience, but rather a deduction from the nature of time itself, that the past never returns, and the future has not yet arrived. From the perspective of pure experience, he argued, consciousness with the same content must be considered the same consciousness no matter how much time passes. Just as in thought or will, when a single objective representation operates continuously, we must see it as one thing, even if its unifying activity is temporally interrupted. It is still, at its core, one unified stream. So, Nishida's pure experience invites us to look beyond the surface of our thoughts and judgments, to delve into the immediate, undivided reality of our present awareness. It is a concept that challenges us to reconsider what we truly mean by knowing and being, suggesting that at the heart of all our complex mental life lies a profound and